Open up to the residents that are affected by the double yellow lines. Ma'am, just the name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Deb Colometta. I live at 107 Forest International Speedway. I live with double yellow lines in front of my house now. I have two small children, and I have a babysitter that I've hired so that I can be here tonight to speak on the issue. Just a couple of comments, and then a question for you. And first of all, for anyone who watches this after the fact, I think that it's very educational to be here in person and to see the dynamics in the room, and hearing the sighing and the the nonverbals, and just kind of watching the interactions is very educational. Mr. Seibold, I heard you say that your daughter said that the lines keep people from crossing over. It's a federal mandate that you can't cross over the lines, of course. That's probably one of the reasons why I feel it makes it very dangerous to have the double yellow lines. And I understand maybe it's an interpretation, but one of the reasons why people are so upset is because it's a highly populated area with many small children. I have a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old, and when he was in kindergarten, I walked him to school every single day that it wasn't raining, and sometimes when it was raining. And now it's different with the yellow lines. We haven't been able to do that as much because the traffic and the detours around Robin Hood has been very dangerous. It's not safe. Sometimes when I do walk him to school, if it's a particularly mild day, if he's on a scooter, when I'm coming back, I actually keep the scooter out so that I have cars that are whizzing by me give a little bit of space, like as a buffer zone between me and the cars that zip by, because they don't cross over the yellow line. So one of the differences is when he was in kindergarten without the yellow lines, the cars would stay at a safe distance from the pedestrians where there are no sidewalks. And now it's like they're programmed to follow the lines because they don't want to break the law, but I don't have a sidewalk to walk on with my kids. I think that there is a lot of confusion because of the communication issues. I know that I get notifications if there's an administrative position open in the town in my email inbox, but I didn't hear about the lines being painted. It's a huge safety issue. You cannot talk to a single resident who lives on those streets, who has young children, who's very hyper aware of this, that the speed has to have doubled. I mean, I know that maybe there's no traffic data that supports this. I took video. I work at home, and I took video today of the cars whizzing by. It starts at 1:30. It's pretty dead during the day, but it starts at 1:30. And I leave to get my son at 2:15, 2:20, and that's when it's the busiest, and people just take it as a license to fly up the street with the double yellow lines. So the reality is, even though they were put down and it's a federal mandate to make it safer, it has made it less safe. And I can challenge anyone because I walk with a baby carriage, and if you can't see me coming, it's a bright red baby carriage. Mm-hmm. My son's on a scooter. We've all got reflectors. We look very nerdy going to school, but we're safe. And I think that a lot of the neighbors are concerned or confused because when part of Forest Street was paved a couple of years ago, they removed one of the crosswalks at, I believe it's Spruce or Spring Street? Spruce Street. Mm-hmm. And it's gone, and it never got replaced. But yet we have these double yellow lines, so it's becoming like an area that you can't walk through. I heard someone say that you have to have these double lines. You don't have to have them if it's less than 16 feet. There's an area of Forest Street that couldn't be wider than 16 feet. You can barely get 2 cars past, and yet people whiz right by. And they almost clip mirrors, especially in the winter, right at the Robin Hood Street or Robin Hood Lane or whatever the street is.
That road at the end of Oak when you take a left hand there. That's narrow. Yeah,
it's very narrow. Yeah. So to have a double yellow line there, people can barely go in 2 directions. So I think that's one of the reasons why many of the people are concerned. I mean no disrespect, but Mr. Wilson, I understand that this is an issue that people have beaten to death. This is my first meeting that I've attended on this issue, because I have to get a babysitter to come to these meetings, and they go very long sometimes. And I feel like this is one of the most important issues, because the parents I talk to at Robin Hood School, I'm not speaking for them, but I can just say my experience has been that we're all more afraid of walking to school with the kids, and that's what we should be encouraging the kids to do, to be able to walk. I bought in this community, I bought on a street that didn't have double yellow lines, so that I wouldn't be living on a street where people whiz by. You know, I understand that there are more important issues. I can't believe I'm going on record saying this, but yeah, there are definitely more important issues in Robin Hood right now. My father came to my house today. Why? Not just to help my mom babysit, but to remove dead rats from in front of my house. Okay? That's not something that I ever thought I'd deal with. And when he went to Lowe's, he rubbed elbows with 2 other people who are also from Stoneham, who were removing rats and trying to get rid of rats. This has become a smaller issue to me, because I think the rats are a safety issue, you know, that's kind of surpassing this. So that's the reasoning of why the residents are upset. That being said, all of that, what I just said, is basically irrelevant. It's water under the bridge, because if it's a federal law and it has to be done this way and it can't be interpreted in a different way, we have to look at what's being done. Is there a way that we can look at it on a case-by-case basis? Can we look at the streets and say, hey, we did the double yellow line like the federal mandate said, it's becoming more problematic. We didn't put in the sidewalks. There's no room to put in the sidewalks with the double yellow line. There's no way the car could physically fit through. It would have to become a one-way. Is there a way to petition and say, can we make a special exception? It's a school zone, or it seems that, there is too many close calls. I can tell you, my son is 7 years old, and when I was walking him when he was a baby, I had none of these issues. And now I have a 2-year-old, and the whole time, I barely take her on walks, because the neighborhood, the lines have been there. It's been too dangerous to walk around. People go through way too fast. So I understand there are definitely other issues, but this is definitely something that needs to be discussed. And if it's a mandate and it's a closed case and it has to be double yellow lines, then I would ask, when there was an outcry of painting over the yellow lines, and people said, okay, well, let's have the yellow lines removed. I woke up the next morning, I was like, thank God, the lines are gone, yes. And then 3 days later, they reappeared, because whatever paint they had put over the lines was some kind of removable or washable paint. And I'm asking, do we pay for that? I mean, that couldn't have been free. Somebody paid for that. And whether we paid out of Stoneham money or Massachusetts money, I'm mad as hell that they did that, and it was probably expensive and it was ineffective. And that's also what I'm upset about. And then a couple of weeks ago, I was looking at the yellow lines, and I thought to myself, unfortunately, they used really permanent paint, because they don't look like they're fading in any way. And, I was kind of disappointed about that. I thought, enough time had passed that they'd nope, they're still blinding yellow, and then realized that they got painted over again. So it seemed to me and my neighbors that it didn't need to be painted over, and it cost money. So who's paying for that? Who paid to have it painted over, and then who paid to have it painted again when it didn't need to be? I don't know. I mean, if it uses Chapter 90 funds to paint it, I've lived there 10 years now this year, and it's never been paved the whole time I've lived there. So these are just concerns. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be disrespectful in any way. It's of utmost concern to me. I can't have my kids playing in the front of my house now because of the way the cars drive. And I took video, I've been taking videos, and the cars it's just different. It's one after another, and they continue to zoom down the street. And one final thing, I know that the speed limit is being proposed to be 25 miles per hour, but it's no good if you can lower it to 5 miles if there's no enforcement. It means nothing. And in fact, my neighbor had a sign in front of her house up until a year ago that said 25 miles per hour, and it was removed. And now there are double yellow lines, so we're in trouble. Thank you.
I'm sorry, could I ask a question, if you don't mind?
Yes.
Do you, if you mind, Mr. Chairman, do you find that where you said it starts at 1:30?
Yes.
Generally speaking, does it seem to you that it has increased, maybe the volume has increased or the speed has increased due to the construction? It seems like people are maybe racing to get to pick up, or?
It could be.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just trying to sort of gauge, when you said that, it kind of clicked in my head, like 1:30 is a very specific time for like volume and speed to pick up,
I have
so.
personally found as a Massachusetts driver that around the state, that the traffic starts about around when people are trying to get their kids home from school. So whether they work in Stoneham or Woburn and they're trying to cut through Stoneham to get to Reading or Wakefield or wherever, we are a cut-through town, we're an access point. So that is, that's what I have noticed. I believe if the lines were painted in the summer, it was summer break, so I didn't notice a lot over the summer. But then I definitely pay attention to it, because as I'm looking, okay, what's the traffic situation today? Can I walk to get my son? Can I not walk? So I'm very aware, after lunchtime, that it seriously increases.
And then my other question is to the Spruce, you said the Spruce Street sidewalk was. Crosswalk, I mean, was removed?
It was removed probably 3 years ago.
Was there a request made to have it put back in? Are you aware of?
There was a police officer who lives on Ruin Street, I think, and I had actually just spoken to him briefly, and he said, gee, it would be great to have sidewalks here. And I said, yeah, that would be great. And then I'll be completely honest, I had it on my list of things to do for a while. My son was in kindergarten at the time, and I got so discouraged because it felt like, sometimes I would come to the meetings and you feel like you're saying things, and I don't know if anything I'm saying now is ringing a bell with anybody, but I feel like it's overwhelming. I'm looking at sidewalks being put in on William Street, and as a resident, I'm like, why are they replacing these? Why now? Why, when the people of Oak Street are having all these issues with the rats and the water and the construction and the detours, that, oh my God, there's so many detours. Why now to put these sidewalks in when they're already there? I mean, they look like they're in perfect condition, but yet we don't even have sidewalks on the way to Robin Hood School.
So some are different projects, different areas, things
Correct.
get scheduled differently. But I think to that point, I think it would be great if the town administrator could look at that, and the safety committee could look at that crosswalk and see if it's something that could be repainted. And in the future, you don't have to come to a meeting. Send an email. Just pick up the phone and call the police chief.
I'll tell you, I have to be honest again. I did call DPW.
Okay.
One of the first time, I picked up the phone and I said, gosh darn it, I'm looking at all these Facebook comments, and it's making me mad as heck. It was like 7:30 in the morning, and I thought, I'm going to respond to Facebook. And then I said, you know what, I'm going to do the mature thing, and I'm going to pick up the phone, and I'm going to talk to the people who are actually in the offices that make these decisions. And I'm going to put my phone down, and I'm going to pick up the real phone and call Town Hall. And actually, I don't think that DPW is even in Town Hall, but I called and I spoke to someone, and I was so shut down immediately for even having the gall to call about these yellow lines, and they had just been painted,
Right.
that I felt like, you know what? I don't need to invite that negativity into my life. And I felt like I'd been yelled at.
Right.
And
I was actually referring to the sidewalk, the
Yeah.
crosswalk. So
it was around the same, time that I had called
3 years ago?
No, I did get a name of a person I called
Okay.
to try to find out, and then I didn't pursue it because I felt a little bit. I felt discouraged. There were some other issues going on in town, like such as Weiss Farm, and I started to get really down on the town. But I love Stoneham. I
Yeah.
love living here.
Well, I think that's something that is probably a fairly easy fix, and in terms of safety, could be something that the TA could look at to see if it's a crosswalk that could be replaced.
Street, yeah.
And certainly, even with the schools, if that's something you brought to the schools, having served on the school committee for 10 years, we get calls about crosswalks. So you don't necessarily have to go to the DPW or the police chief. You can even talk to the school administration about that kind of stuff, and that gets discussed between the two. And I know that because having served on the school committee for 10 years, we've dealt with those kinds of things, especially in an area that is near a school in terms of crossing to get your kids and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's not sidewalks,
Yep.
and it's something minor, but I think it's something that could be probably pretty easily resolved unless there's a very specific reason why it was removed, in which case you would have an answer.
And that is where people cross to get to Robin Hood if they live on Constitution Way or Street, that whole neighborhood with, I don't know if it's Magnolia or, but anyway, it's across North Street. They cross North Street, which I don't know where the crosswalk is on North Street, but if we lived in that area, there's no way we'd be walking to school, because trying to cross North Street, you might as well be trying to cross 93.
But it's the end of Forest, right where you take that turn, I think the crosswalk was there. Used
Okay.
to be there.
But see, when people are trying to get their kids to school, you have to walk up a quarter of a mile with two, with two kids. I couldn't do that, and then walk a quarter of a mile back, and then to Robin Hood. So the reality is, you can do traffic studies and all that, but unless you're walking the path that morning, or, I saw a police detail had been there. Of course, I mean, no disrespect to the police, I love the Stoneham police, but I saw a police detail checking for the speed, because there was a detour and there weren't any detours, there weren't any police officers around. We saw many near accidents. Where I live on Forest Street is where DeWitt comes down. People fly down DeWitt and they make a turn. They don't even stop at the stop sign. And they had a police officer there, but he was there at like 11 a.m. And my neighbor texted me and said, "Oh, great time to have try to check on do a car count. It's the middle of the day," and then they left, shortly thereafter. So it seemed to me it wasn't an accurate reflection of what's actually going on. How are the studies conducted? I'm not trying to question any of the studies. I'm just saying what the reality is. I'm lucky to be alive, because I've had so many close calls. Even my mother walking my son with my baby girl, she almost got hit by a car, and she stopped walking altogether. She's like, forget him wearing a helmet. We should all be wearing helmets if we're going to be walking that stretch to school. So I feel that it's a very important issue. I feel that it's a safety issue. It's important to have the crosswalks there, but unfortunately, even with the double yellow lines, and again, if they have to be there, and there's no way we can get around that, and there's no way we can discuss getting a sanction for that, when they don't see a crosswalk and there's double yellow lines, forget it. So that's just the reality.
Well, and it
of
sounds like the signage also needs to be replaced.
Yes,
You know,
they took down the 25 mile per hour sign.
And that may be a good area for one of those flashing, that we're getting.
I would pay for it, honestly, in front of my house. They have them in Melrose. I would pay for it. For my own house, not for
Okay,
anybody
that's
else's.
third, I was going first too. Third, we've actually ordered some of those flashers, so we can talk about that. What I was going back to was, one, I can speak to Chief McIntyre, because you're concerned about speeding, of putting a vehicle down there to see if there, if that, I'm not doubting you, but I'm just saying we need to see from the police department if there is, because honestly, a lot of times when, I'm not doubting you, but when you're seeing someone going 25 miles an hour, you think that they're going much faster than they actually are.
Yes, may I respond to that? So I totally understand that it may seem that way, but before the double yellow lines, what would happen is most of the commuting would happen in one direction. So you'd get a car coming in the one direction, and then the opposite. Most of them were heading towards William Street or Salem Street. And then at the end of the day, most of the traffic would be going in the opposite direction. And now what's happening is they're squished to one side because you can't cross the double yellow line, and it makes it more dangerous, as if there are people walking, even when there are sidewalks, the curb's not going to help you if the car's flying. So
We'll speak with him about putting down theirs to have him check that out. Second, on the crosswalk, and can't say why it was taken out. There is a general process where you need to determine, go through certain standards to where a crosswalk should be. Part of that is when an individual goes into a crosswalk, there's an expectation that they're in a safety zone, and that vehicles can see you, and that they have enough time to stop, and so forth. A lot of communities, over the years, and I've worked in some, where they've actually, 20 years ago, just threw up crosswalks without any real rationale or reason. I will look into next week that particular area of if there was a reason that was removed, or if there is another area within the street that you can place one that gives you that safety zone within that crosswalk.
The woman who we bought our home from said that actually she went to Robin Hood in the 60s and they had always fought for a crosswalk there before there were even houses in that area. She said she remembered there was a greenhouse there and it was a foundation for many years. They were fighting to get a crosswalk. They finally got it. She happened to drive by our house and stop by unannounced, and we were happy to see her. And she said, I can't believe they removed the crosswalk that we fought so hard for. So it's been something
I can't
that's...
speak of why it was removed
Yeah.
years ago, but there is the possibility that that was just put up there
Yep.
without looking at,
It could be.
basically.
Yeah, it could be.
But if
Or-
there is something we can do to put one there that
Right.
would give you, the proper safety zone to cross, I don't have a problem with that whatsoever.
And I think when the Forest Street was paved partially and they stopped, they paved over the crosswalk and stopped maybe 10 feet beyond it. And I had always thought maybe they just forgot to put it back because they covered over it and didn't get back to it, so, but,
I do have the crosswalk down.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Colomita, I want to apologize for what you describe as feeling like you were shut down when you called the town department. I don't think that's appropriate. And for those that don't agree with the process tonight, that's why we have to hear from these people so they can feel validated. Because when they call the town, if they feel like they're getting shut down, and they call and they're on a list for their problem and it's unresolved, this is the last, I guess, stop on the OK Corral. It's the last forum that they have, Anthony, to present their case and to feel like they're being heard. So thank you for coming in. Sorry that you had to get a babysitter, but thank you for coming in, and I appreciate your feedback. I hope that you do feel validated
Thank
with your
you.
comments.
yes.
Also, we do have public comment as well, and while we might not be able to take a vote, we can certainly listen to your concerns under public comment anytime, which is right at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be an agenda item.
Yes.
And all of our emails are right on the website. I can honestly tell you, I didn't get one phone call or email about any of this.
Okay.
So anytime, feel free to email any of us.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think people think that they're becoming active when they are on Facebook.
Right.
And it doesn't make it to
No.
the official channels.
Exactly.
You see it.
Yeah.
I just want to reiterate and encourage you to come here. Don't expect an email to get a crosswalk done. I can't get a crosswalk done. I mean, we just heard that we're not getting any more painting done this summer. South School has no lines, has no crosswalks. The crosswalk that was there is over, just like you're saying. I'm not able to get that done, so I don't think that any random citizen sitting at home can fire off an email and expect a crosswalk there tomorrow. So your best course of action is to come right here and let your voice be heard.
Thank you, and I appreciate the time. And just in closing, I just want to say, I do love Stoneham. We've been here for 10 years, and I feel like about 5 years ago, I started to see a lot of young families moving in here. And I was thinking, this is it. We are in the new Melrose of the future. This is it. And now I'm starting to see, in our circle, I can see a lot of families starting to move out because they're starting to get frustrated with the operation of the town. I'm just saying, it can be frustrating. And I feel like I tell them, look, we have a great town. You go to another town and you might get the same thing. But we want to retain, it's a retention issue too. We want to retain tax generating, paying families. That's what we want. We don't want transient individuals. We want, individuals who be here and pay taxes in Stoneham and give Stoneham business and love the town as much as we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more residents would like to? Ma'am?
Hi, Deborah, 72 Bard Street. Probably not going to be as nice as my neighbor because I'm pregnant, I'm tired. But the lack of communication, I've also made phone calls, and I pretty much get a bunch of BS run around. June 21st, 2016, lines were painted on my street. Tuesday, you guys had a meeting. You voted yes to have the lines removed. That never happened. So what changed from 2016 to now that the lines were repainted? Anybody?
I'm gonna defer everything to the DPW director or the traffic study. I mean,
The TA.
I'm sorry, the TA.
MacArthur was never on the list.
I'm not on
Forest
MacArthur,
Street.
although I do feel for
Okay,
them
I can't speak
because,
for Forest, but I can speak for MacArthur, was that he never,
Forest was always on the list.
you said last year in some article that it's a state mandate, 6,000 vehicles require double yellow lines. Forest Street does not have 250 vehicles an hour driving. I live there. I've lived there since 2006.
There's also discretion, depending on what. Forest Street, as you know, is a very windy road, okay? The town has the discretion, and it also connects to another community.
Right, it connects to Woburn.
Correct.
Ruland also connects, it goes through Stoneham, North Street, correct?
Ruling, yes.
Yeah. So I called the town administrator last year, and he told me that he was kind of thrown into this position, and I said, what's up with the double yellow lines?
excuse me, I'm sorry, what do you mean?
Thomas Younger?
This was,
Well,
no, I think that was Ron you spoke to, because Ron- that was
I-
Ron quit that day.
No, Bob Markle was there, because he was.
somebody had left.
Yeah.
And he gave communication to the DPW and said, these lines need to be painted. So, I'm sorry, I thought I spoke
I'm
to
sorry,
you.
I didn't, yeah.
No, it's okay. I thought I spoke to you and you said, I'm getting some phone calls, how about a single line? And I said,
That wouldn't have been me.
okay, well, I don't know who it was. But I put up my house for sale because of the lack of communication in this town. It's pretty sad. All right, I have a 2-year-old. I'm expecting another girl. I agree with you. I'm in a stroller. I have a dog. So next year, I'm going to have 3, a dog, a 2-year-old, and a newborn in a stroller. I don't even know my neighbors on Forest Street because I'm afraid to walk there. I walk on, I go to Spruce, Lee Street, Alden Street, because they have sidewalks and they don't have double yellow lines. So it's actually really frustrating because you're saying it's a state mandate, but where is my state letter or an email?
When Forest Street was originally built many, many years ago, the residents did not want sidewalks because of the number of trees that would have to come down. If the town wants to look at putting sidewalks on Forest Street, all it takes is money.
Well, which is fine. Isn't it cheaper to remove the yellow lines? Because you can't put sidewalks in the, at the end of Forest Street or beginning, where, where you live at 107, because it's very tight. You think residents are willing to give up, part of their land to put a sidewalk?
It's not their land, the town owns back from the edge of the roadway 9 feet. It's all town land.
Oh, that's good, because I had paid $900 to have a tree removed because they said it's not the town's, it was mine.
Depends on where it is. The town owns 9 feet back from the edge of the roadway.
Well, you can Google map or whatever, but in 2006, when I moved, there was never any yellow lines. So, and I respect that changes are made, but I never get communication. It's very quick for the town to send me an email notice that says my water bill is due, but when my street is painted with double yellow lines, I don't get any communication, and I think it's pathetic.
Thank you for your comments. Normally, and I've been working this since 1982, I don't recall, and like I said, we'll look at improved communication, but I don't recall any public works department, when they were doing line painting, that they sent notifications out to residents. They normally did it in late evening. They would have a police presence with them. And if some of the painting work was not done properly, it got resolved. Said we can look into communication if there's improvement, but I can tell you historically, I don't recall when I've ever done, a DPW done line painting that they communicated out to the public.
I just think the difference here is, if you're talking about repainting an existing line to make it right, yeah, people aren't gonna care. What happened here was, there was no line, they went to bed, they woke up, there was a double
Right.
line.
Our whole street
Walk down the street,
changed.
And it's like, what the heck happened here?
And
Nobody told me this was coming.
Right, and then somebody said the word uniformed, but nothing is uniformed, because in 2016, you all voted, let's remove the lines. I waited, I said, maybe because, there's construction, they're waiting, for that to be over, so, because of the cut-through street, it never happened. I think it was maybe 8 months ago, they painted it black. I thought it was a slap in the face because the next day it rained, it washed right off. And also, I sent an email on June 21st, 2016. I sent an email 3 weeks ago. 2 days later, there's a cop every day on my street. Thank you to the Stoneham PD, but I feel bad because at 6:15 in the morning, there is no drivers on the road. It's still dark out. So that's kind of a waste of taxpayers, Granted, they'll make their rate, but we have to pay for it, correct?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I think considering the circumstances, you're exactly right. I think considering, and Bob just said it, it is discretionary. And that's what our discussion was in 2016, that there is not a one-size-fits-all approach to the town, and that every neighborhood and the needs of that neighborhood, depending on whether it's highly populated, depending on whether there's children, that all has to be weighed. And I know how you feel when you say you felt like it was a slap in the face, because that's what people communicated to me.
Right.
And I don't respond on Facebook, but I got a ton of
Well,
snapshots
I am one
on Facebook.
constantly, because if I make the call, then I don't get the right answer, I get the runaround answer. So my frustration goes to the Stoneham Community Group, and then you have 90 people.
I hope you run for
responding.
selectman. How's that? That's how much I appreciate your commentary tonight, as I appreciate Deb's commentary also. I hope that tonight you feel you got your voice heard, because I think you needed that. I think all of you need that down there. I think there's frustration down there. I think there's frustration in the town in general. I think it's very high. I think communication is a huge problem, and we do talk about it a lot, but unfortunately, it doesn't change.
Right.
It doesn't change. And I share a lot of your frustration, so thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more comments from the residents on the WL lines? Yeah, sure.
Just real quick, it
mind
doesn't
just
start
grabbing
at
the mic?
1:30 in the morning. It actually starts at 6 o'clock in the morning. I live in the Law Park in MacArthur Road. I have 2 kids, an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. And
What's your name and address for the record,
my
please?
name is Ben Breen. I live at 8 Chase Road. And it's not just going to school. We used to have to walk up to Elm Street to bring the kids to the bus stop there. They just put a bus stop at the end of Chase Road, right outside my house, which is fantastic. The fact of the matter is, we walk the kids up and down to the playground, to the baseball park, and to soccer practice on a weekly basis. I see tons of families walking up and down that road. I see kids riding bikes up and down that road. The long-time residents that live there have told me, ever since the yellow lines were painted on MacArthur Road, the cars have started going a hell of a lot faster. And it's made it, obviously, it's way, way, way more unsafe. So I understand your point about when you paint double yellow lines and you let little Jimmy cross the road, you don't want the car to overtake him. But there is no sidewalk. So what you have to understand is people are actually walking on the road. They're not walking on a sidewalk. They're on the road. And if the cars are going faster, it's very, very, very unsafe. We're trying to slow the cars down, not make them go faster. So, that's it.
Thank you. Any more comments? Seeing none?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we remove the yellow lines from Forest Street.
There's no vote being taken here. I mean, what I did see last year is that miscellaneous item got moved up to the beginning of the meeting, and we're not supposed to vote on miscellaneous things unless it's documented. So, and that
This is an
actually...
agenda item, Mr. Chairman.
This is an agenda item.
It is an agenda, okay.
I mean, it's an
Yeah,
agenda.
it's an agenda item.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
I'll
fine.
make a motion that we remove the yellow lines. They're going to be removed on MacArthur? Is that what I'm hearing? Because they're not supposed to be there, Tom?
no, they're
Am I
staying.
wrong? So I'll make a motion that we remove the yellow lines on MacArthur and on Forest Street.
I'll second that.
Roll call vote. Shelley?
No.
Caroline?
Yes.
Anthony?
No.
Tom?
Yes.
Nope.
I will make a motion that the town committee follows the, MUTCD, which is what we need to do, and that we do speed studies and enforcement on MacArthur and Forest.
I'll amend that motion to include the discretionary language that Mr. Grover discussed in a public meeting a moment ago, to review it with a discretionary factor, because he can be discretionary, and I want that language in there.
Funding source for the study,
No, the police have, I'm sorry, the study I'm referring to is simply the police have equipment, they put the things on either side that measure speed as you pass. They've done it in various other parts of town.
And a counter too as well.
Yeah, it counts and measures
Yeah.
speed,
Yeah.
but we should know what we're talking about for speed on these roads.
Yeah.
I'll second that, Anthony.
Roll call vote, Shelley?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Wait a
Yes.
second, what are we voting on?
We're voting-
Because there was an amendment.
The amendment was to review,
So you seconded my motion.
I seconded your motion.
Okay.
the amendment was to include language for discretionary input from the DPW director, because that's what he said a minute ago.
So that.
So that when he
what
comes
he's referring
back-
to is in the MUTCD or.
Yeah, he has discretion in the law. Exactly, that's exactly what I'm saying.
I believe that because the title, Mr. Grover's title has changed, that discretionary falls to Mr. Young. Am I right in saying that?
According to the Town Administrator Selectmen's Act, there was a previous Board of Public Works. And under the act, the Board of Public Works functions rolled into the TA. Mr. Grover has certain specific powers under the town code, such as things as granting street permits and such. So that generally falls under Mr. Grover in my jurisdiction.
So are you saying it's a joint decision, Mr. Younger?
I'm sorry?
Are you saying it's a joint decision?
I'm saying is that under, since the town administrator's position, I'm taking myself away, the town administrator's position assumed under the TA's Act all the functions of the previous Board of Public Works.
So it's your decision?
It would be road work that would come under my eventual decision, correct?
Mr. Chairman, you have a.
In consultation with the proper individuals.
You have a motion and a second. I'm just trying to understand, I'm trying
The
to
amendment?
understand your amendment,
The
because
amendment-
you're asking for discretionary language, but what Mr. Wilson proposed is that they utilize the
committee
MUTDC,
utilizes the document.
which
Includes
includes that
discretionary
language, so I'm
language.
not sure what,
So what I'm trying
Your
to say is
motion is-
that during the review, because it's discretionary, the outcome may change. And I want that included in the motion.
The way I understood Anthony's motion was that we follow the MAU.
Correct.
Which is every street in town, right? I mean.
No.
No.
If it's beyond 16.
No, it
Mr.
has all the
Gro-
criteria of what should you stripe, what should you not stripe, when do the
You
decision
get a
makers
double
have
line or no
discretion.
line.
Can I
16 feet.
define what the discretionary is?
Please.
The discretionary is only to add to the MUTCD, not to subtract.
Well, then that doesn't, then every street in town would need to be striped.
It very possibly could be, Tom, depending on what the streets look like.
But there's been plenty of streets that have been paved, particularly in that MacArthur area.
Mr.
that
Chairman, you have
no
a
lines
motion
whatsoever.
and a second on the floor.
I withdraw my amendment language from your motion, Anthony.
Okay.
I still need clarification, so
We're
to follow
voting,
these lines, to follow these guidelines, and they are guidelines.
There is a 435-page document that defines everything from striping to street signs, to speed limits, to, it's very extensive across this
So I guess-
entire country.
All right, so I
It
guess-
does have the language around where there is discretion. And it is, as far as I know, Massachusetts law. I am simply saying that I endorse our traffic committee using that standard to define our traffic rules in this town of Stoneham.
Mr. Chairman, but you also included,
A
study.
Oh, I'm
that
sorry.
You
yes.
also included language to look at the actual
Measure
speeds on
speeds
MacArthur
and
and
do
Forest.
enforcement at the correct time of day.
Right.
That's
on
two
those.
streets, when we're dealing with the rest of the town.
Well,
No,
right now,
I'm
these
saying-
are the
well,
people before us.
The enforcement was on the two
so-
streets just because of the specific concerns expressed. I'm referring, in terms of the guide, I'm talking about townwide.
Townwide, we need a funding source, because now you're talking a huge study, lots of.
No. The guide, I'm sorry. If you would like, I can say, if it's too confusing, I can separate it into two motions. But simply, one, the move that we request the town traffic committee is the correct name, leverage the MUTCD document to make their decisions around markings. And the second point of that was, based on what we've heard today, I think it is reasonable to request that the chief does traffic counts and speed studies on MacArthur and Forest. They have equipment to do that. They do in other parts of town. And that they plan a schedule of enforcement as well on those two streets during the times of days that speed concerns were expressed.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question on the motion. The traffic committee recommends. What I just heard is that Mr. Younger decides. Your motion had language that the traffic committee makes a decision. I think that would be out of what their purview is as a board. So you can change your motion, but I don't think they decide. As far as what he just said, he decides.
I believe Tom Young is on that committee.
Then if you.
He has final say.
Right,
He
but
has-
the
so
committee
he's in-
doesn't
If
decide.
you would like, I will
He's in the
change the
committee, though.
language that Mr. Younger work with the committee to make his decision.
I would like that.
But he's in the committee, though.
Correct.
Get two
Point of order,
conversations
Mr.
going
Chairman,
on.
point of order.
Excuse me. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have one more question around the motion. I recall reading the guidelines in the DOT differently. I'd like to review those guidelines before I vote on this and see, because my recollection is that there was discretionary language and that it wasn't mandatory. I'd like to review those guidelines. So if we're going to have a motion and a vote, I'm not going to be prepared to vote on that this evening without seeing that section in writing, as I recall that it's...
470-page
yeah.
document, we should probably see.
That section.
Mr. Chairman,
Section.
So are you thinking that it's not in there, or you're thinking that it is?
I'm thinking that discretionary language is in there.
Okay, so what he's saying is they have to use that document,
Which would cover it.
which
one
would
way or the
cover
other.
that. So that's the only part that I'm confused about, because I think you're both saying the same thing, actually. Because if it's in the document, you're asking that it
Correct.
be used.
I'm asking to
So
use the
I
documents, if
just-
that discretionary language is in there, it's
Okay.
covered by my
Okay.
motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
To me, it's like the Republican health care bill. Nobody's read it, but we're going to vote
Nobody
on
reads it, yeah.
it. You know,
It's
so
like the Obamacare,
I think
too,
we have
same
to.
thing.
Reread it this afternoon, or this section that's relevant for today.
But it's a 470-page document. And Shelley, you complain every time that you don't have documentation
Tom,
when you're here.
it's a federal guideline.
I'm
It's a
just
federal,
asking
I'm
you
not
to-
the expert. I said that earlier. I'm not the expert.
We're
What
going to vote
I'm
to use a
saying
document
is,
none of us have read.
it's a federal guideline. It's like saying we're not going to adhere to the federal fire standards. Are you kidding? It's a federal guideline.
So there's almost... I have
All
to-
I'm saying is, they're both saying the same thing.
I don't think
That's
we
the
are,
part
but I understand your point, but I
Yeah.
don't think we are.
So-
I want the assurance of seeing what I'm voting on in front of me, and I don't have that tonight, so that's my hesitation. But I
Again-
don't trust that it's not true.
I understand.
Again, knowing that the town administrator is on the traffic committee, and hearing this, Anthony, you want these studies done at these MacArthur Road, Forest Street.
Oh, I
and then-
mean,
and then-
we do it all the time.
Right, and all the time, but start with them and then move forward. But that's why we have the professionals doing their job. That's why, I mean, they follow that guideline. They follow the federal guideline.
Well, the studies-
You-
the
You have
studies
your,
are-
you have your
Mr. Chairman,
engineering
The town
stamp,
administrator's good as, I don't know.
It doesn't.
you know, that could be jeopardized. He's not gonna do anything that's gonna
The TA is
jeopardize it.
looking for-
Just trying to clarify whether there's a vote or not a vote. My intention is to do the traffic counts in the speed
Thank you.
review at MacArthur and Forest, and I would have done that with or without a vote. Two, going to be looking in the crosswalk issue.
Yes.
About where we can legitimately place a crosswalk down in that area. So those are going to be done with or without the vote.
There's a
Okay.
motion and a second on the
So
floor.
going back to
so-
the crosswalk, I,
Let's take this vote first, Tom. Let's just move.
well,
let's
there's
get this-
so many
No,
things
no,
out here.
Wait, but the
We're
motion,
dealing with two streets out of 60 miles, Bob, is that right? How many miles of streets we have? 73. 73 miles of streets here, and we have no uniformity. I don't even know what we're voting on, you know? To talk about the crosswalks, tonight, we're going to do Spruce Street. I've mentioned several times that
this is gonna keep going.
Summer Street doesn't have them, They don't have the crosswalks, they've been paved over. I've had Tom ask to go to the traffic committee to get a crosswalk put on Franklin Street from the parking lot over to where Fusion Taste is, which is heavily
We have already
traveled.
discussed.
Mr.
Have you
Chairman?
discussed it?
Yes, we did.
And
Mr. Chairman?
Where did it go?
We're
Mr.
looking at
Chairman?
making sure the distances are correct.
If I may, you say in one instance, you want the people to come here so that their issues can be resolved, and then in the next statement, you're saying we shouldn't be doing this. So I don't even understand any of this discussion right now. There is a motion and a second on the floor to look at the two streets that the residents came to complain about tonight. So I'm completely baffled with the direction that this conversation's even going in. And if we shouldn't be looking at crosswalks, why are they even here then? I mean, that's, you're saying you want people to come and voice their opinions to get stuff done, and then in the next statement, you're saying, we can't get anything done, so why are they even here? It doesn't make any sense, this conversation at all, and you have a motion and a second on the floor, and I'd suggest that we move the vote.
I'm gonna say something. I do apologize for not stopping this conversation, because I know I always give people the chance to talk. Sometimes, I know, I always didn't get the chance to talk, so that's why I keep it going sometimes, and that has to stop, and I get it, and I see the reason why. This did drift, and again, that last meeting last year, and there's no disrespect to the double yellow lines, but the way this conversation went, that's when I was getting hammered with phone calls saying, that dysfunction word came up into play, and that stuck with me, and I do not want this to continue going on and on like that, and that's a clear sign, and I just want to move it. I'm going to move the question. Motion's been made, seconded. Roll call vote.
Tell me what the motion is at this point.
Anthony?
Actually, do you have that written down, David?
And sure. Wilson moved that we request that Tom Younger work with the Town Traffic Committee to leverage the MUTCD to make decisions on the markings, and move that they do a traffic and speed study on MacArthur and Forest and plan a schedule of enforcement during the proper times of day. Shelley McNeil seconded those motions.
Separate motions or one?
I intended as one motion. If you want to
So-
strike one of the moves in there, just so it's and.
Sure.
So have them continue to do their job, pretty much. Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to
Caroline?
abstain because Mr. Young is going to do it
Anthony?
anyway.
Yes.
Tom?
I'm gonna have to abstain because there's no information here. The motion is two different things, so.
You abstain? Yeah. Okay. Chair's in favor for the committee to continue doing their job.